Greetings, everyone, and welcome to our second roundtable of today's three-way summit, where we talk about Web3. Is it moving too fast or not fast enough? We have a wonderful cohort of experts that we've assembled to have candid and open discussion on Web3. And we're going to move in with distant speed of lightning. But first, I'd like to introduce you to Ricky Houck, Jacky Mfon, David Jean, and Kristina Bruhahn, who I want to individually have introduce themselves, and then we'll begin chopping wood and planting seeds. Ricky, go for it.
Hey, thanks for having me on, Chris. I'm really looking forward to the conversation. Kristina and David and I actually had a chance to sync up before this, and it seems like you got a really great group for the panel. I work with Touchcast, so my focus is really on extended reality, building 3D virtual worlds and advancing how we engage with our customers, our employees, how we interact with each other virtually. And so that's really where my expertise in the space is, and I'll kick it over to you for the next person.
Excellent. Jacky, please.
Okay, thanks. I'm very happy to be here. Thank you for inviting me. My name is Jacky. I represent a company called Imperfect. We are all about helping people to onboard in the Web3 space. I also work for AllStarsWomen, where we create inclusion for women that want to get into the Web3 space. I'm glad to be here, and I know we have a wonderful panel. Thank you very much.
David.
Hey everyone, I've been very fortunate to be in the VR, AR, AI space for quite some time. I spent time at Meta, the original Meta, before Facebook acquired the name. We were developing an AR headset, Samsung working on AI, and most recently at Dapper Labs, focusing on blockchain. But I'm also pleased to announce that today I'll be joining Aptos Labs. I think the premier layer one blockchain that everyone just needs to know about. Glad to be here, everyone.
Awesome.
Congratulations, David. Kristina.
Hello, everyone. I'm Kristina Bruhahn, CEO of Continuum.market, and we vet blockchain brands operating in North America to help move the entire Web3 industry forward through trusted brands and services.
And thank you, everyone. Now, shall we begin? With the avid launch and approach, if you will, and the acceleration of Web3, which conceptually is still fairly new to the ethos and ecosystem of technology, considering that we're still heavily embedded and have such a foot in the centralized Web 2, which some will say that we haven't completely and fully arrived to Web 3 as it's been expressed today, and we have Web 2, which we're transitioning from and coming over to a different side. I must ask, Ricky, how fast is the emergence of Web 3 arriving?
Oh my goodness, so fast. I think that there's a lot that's floated under the radar for years now is the reality. So right now we're catching that wave where it's really at the cusp of becoming something special. But in my eyes, the building blocks have been there for a long time, right? Like the introduction of the smartphone, bringing us into digital connection remotely where we don't have to be plugged into a cable to be able to interact with each other via these digital channels. Things like the introduction of VR, which has been around a lot longer than people think. I mean, there's been innovators in the space for a couple of decades now that have been really pushing that boundary. The concepts of like multiverse and having different universes in the world. I mean, these are all concepts that have been around a long time, but we're just reaching a point now where the digital innovation is caught up, where we can take the things that have happened in online gaming, we can take the things that all these kind of initial builders have been constructing in the VR and extended reality space and in the blockchain space. And it's actually getting more utility now where we can scale it, where users can access it without needing to invest tens of thousands of dollars into hardware and getting these incredible setups to get their taste in the space. So I think it's moving incredibly fast, but we got to make sure to remember the giants that we're building on their backs, right?
Sure, indeed. And Kristina, from your lens, what is Web3 today?
Well, I have a data background, so I remember, when we used to use cards and machines to read the ones and zeros. So for my side, Web3 is the enablement of peer-to-peer technology and allowing us to have real-time data and reconciliation backed by blockchain.
Indeed. Jacky, from a humanity lens and from your perspective, what are we looking at when it comes to the acceleration of Web3, and what are you seeing?
Okay, so for me, I'm seeing more people coming into the space. I'm seeing a lot of people gaining momentum and gaining traction, moving it and creating more use cases. Basically, for me, Web3 is just an integration of people, places, and things. So when all this comes together, we are creating a world where people can do anything. So it's all about, for me, in Web3, it's all about the mind. Having to build a roadblock where people can, they don't have limitations on what they can think about, on what they can create, on places that they can go to, on avenues that they can create, on just basically just changing the world as we presently know it, so that people can be more accepted and viable in the space. So Web3 for me is a whole new different horizon, completely different from Web2, where community is also driven and also creators are empowered to do things differently than what they've always done.
Indeed. David, you've been in the vestiges and certainly in the trenches of these type of technologies for some time. As you mentioned earlier, the XR space. For many of you that are attending with us now, that Meta was more than what you have known as Facebook. There was an entity called Meta a time ago, which had great promise, if you will, but went into the doldrums of different places after some time, as most and many startups go to do, not just here in Silicon Valley, but also around the world. Help us make some sense of this, David. I have a question squarely directed for you. Why does Web3 presently at the moment feel so unstable?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think it's just really early. But in terms of Web3 and the metaverse, we're already here. The analogy that I like to give is that when people start talking about Web 2.0, like, what is that? Well, it's user generated content. That means you can create the content that you read on the web versus someone else. That was kind of a breakthrough, right? Like, wow, that's phenomenal that we're all participating in content and being able to share information. And Web 2 started coming about, like the app that I was trying to remember for this talk is like, okay, what was the first Web 2 app that I really gravitated towards? And it was probably Foursquare, right? It was able to use GPS tracking and know where you are. You can then vote on a specific place if you enjoyed it. It was pretty cool. But at the same time, it was still early days. There wasn't a lot of traction at that time because a lot of people didn't have smartphones in 2009. There was a barrier to entry. People didn't know how to use specific apps. That was kind of a new user experience. And we're kind of in that state today where, like, Matthew Ball, he wrote the book on the metaverse, whether you agree with all of his statements or not, but he kind of linked the metaverse into 4 different things. One is that, hey, first we got to have interlocking mesh of technologies. We've got to be able to network in real time so people can hear each other clearly, especially if you're kind of in digital form. 2, we need digital payment processing. Well, a lot of companies do that with fiat today. Roblox, Fortnite, you can have payment systems. But you need also portable computing, and we have that with a smartphone. That's why Pokemon Go with AR, that's kind of become part of our lexicon because we first got our gateway into augmented reality with Pokemon. And the last, of course, is shareable virtual identity. And a lot of us have avatars, but a lot of us don't have digital wallets yet. So all those things that I just mentioned in terms of metaverse, we have all those infrastructures in place, just like how Foursquare was the beginning of Web 2.0. But everything just has to evolve. One is, people want to experience VR, AR, what we call XR, on a head-mounted display. It's ever present. We're not there with form factors yet, but as you know, Apple is coming out. A lot of cool stuff. I heard word on the street from my developer friends. The technology is pretty cool. And of course, when Apple jumps into the game, they're really prone to make things mass market. And then, of course, last in terms of, if you want to own things in the metaverse, that's something we just haven't cracked yet, right? We have to have digital ownership. If I'm going to invest all this time on this game, trying to prove out how cool I am and buy all these cool accessories, well, I kind of want to take that to other places and other metaverses. But the problem is that we don't have the interoperability, the way to actually make that to happen. Like, how does a game avatar costume look in a racing game? And then when you go to a totally different world, let's say an underwater world, how does that translate? The lighting effects, the animations of that texture, all those things just haven't been thought out yet, but we're getting close. It's just the beginning.
Sure. Jacky, to the spirit, and thank you, David. Jacky, to the spirit of this discussion entitled, are we moving too fast with Web3, or are we not moving fast enough? I ask this of you.
We are moving very fast. People have a mindset, people have been saying that it's going to take like 10 years for adoption. But personally, I think it's going to take shorter than that because the way people are getting into the space. Today, I read about Starbucks, what they're doing presently coming into the space. So it's amazing the a number of brands that are jumping right into the space. It's moving fast, the structures are being built. But personally, I think that these top brands will not be the people that will head the way for the metaverse and for Web3. It will be all about DAOs. It will be about decentralized organizations because they understand what decentralization is all about. So it's moving fast, but we're getting a whole lot of momentum. Brands are jumping in, but the creators, people that really understand the driving force of what causes Web3 to be Web3, will be the ones that will gain ground and will forge the way to where Web3 is going to get to. So we are moving very, very fast. In fact, faster than I could have imagined. And we're going to get there faster than, anybody could ever imagine.
It's very interesting and compelling. Kristina, with the powerful work that you're doing with Continuum, I have to ask because it begs and it lends to consider when we look at Web3 and we consider the magnitude of a betterment for the future of humanity, how does Web3 better humanity for the future forward?
That is a great question, one that falls into a data category at Continuum called the Jetsons future. So there's all these things that brands talk about that they could do, but as David mentioned, it comes down to interoperability and the ones and zeros being able to do that in a way that can be auditable, can be trackable, as allows for ownership and self-sovereignty. That also comes with a very steep learning curve. In looking at each one of these brands, they contribute to the global economic engine in their own particular way. And so Continuum is actually monitoring each individual brand through four main quadrants, through Main Street, which is also, you can think of it as mainstream media, through Blockchain Street, which is all of the Web3 people I've met over the last 5 years and the thought leaders of the next decade, through Wall Street and the Capitol Hill market, and the capital markets that drive the global economic engine, specifically supply chains, commodities, energy, agriculture. Any blockchain brand that's touching that is going to have a big impact in terms of adoption. And finally, at Capitol Hill, they have the ability to pull things back if it's infringing on securities laws and things like that. All of those things are factors for every single blockchain brand, and that's not even getting started on what they have to do for ones and zeros, for data integrity, PII protection, GDPR compliance. There's a whole bunch of alphabet soup that is just standard in Web3 because we think that way in our Web3 community. What we found with Web2 coming into Web3 and creating that bridge, it feels very similar to when I used to do Fortune 500 legacy infrastructure upgrades, when we would move things from racks of servers into the cloud, or you would do an infrastructure upgrade to be able to enable geolocation and geofencing and these triggers. All of this comes down to the ability to track the ones and zeros. And from Continuum standpoint, that's all measurable. And we can track that through data science and create these really great tools that allow a novice like my cousin to come in and say, okay, where should I even start in Web3? So I would say that I personally believe we're not moving fast enough. Yes, we're moving very, very fast. But 5 years ago, I saw this great promise of what blockchain could be if we had global adoption and being able to do things like impact pollution, clean up our oceans, build upwards instead of outwards so that we're able to accommodate this many humans, have an impact positively towards the other animals and creatures and things on this planet, that it's not just all about the humans. I really feel that blockchain is a way to give a voice to an individual, no matter what that platform is or what that blockchain brand might be doing. That one contributor is now extremely important in achieving that vision. And that's what I see by the Jetsons future, where consumers truly have the power to leverage all that they do into this wealth generation capability that exists within peer-to-peer technology.
Indeed. And thank you, Kristina. Ricky, we've undoubtedly become more virtual in the past 29 months than we have the past 29 years. You and I have shared in similar expressions of conversation in times past. But the powerful work that you're doing at Touchcast, understanding enterprise and understanding community centralization, adoption, are we headed in a healthy direction when we look at the advent rise of NFTs and dApps and DAOs and crypto assets and the metaverse that David has made mention of? Are we going in a good direction? And if not, where should we be heading? And future forward, what does it look like from your lens?
Yeah, it's really interesting because there's so many different perspectives coming at this all at the same time. And to your point, I mean, the reason we're speaking, right, is it moving too fast or not fast enough? I think that we need to challenge ourselves to think about why we're doing certain things. Should we do certain things? Just because we can doesn't mean we should. I know that's a big beat of the drum that happens in product development. Just because we can doesn't necessarily mean we should, right? And I saw someone in the chat, I think Emily Wright, talk about how some people might not want XR metaverse 3D worlds. And my thoughts on it is that there's some use cases that will adopt it quickly and benefit a lot. And there's some use cases where, a 2D brochure makes sense. Like if I want to order a Chipotle burrito, I'm going to go to DoorDash. I don't need a 3D digital twin of a Chipotle to get access to a burrito. But there might be other use cases like what Starbucks just launched with their loyalty program and leveraging NFTs. And I think there's an interesting trend where a lot of these brands are focusing more on the value they can get from the technology and the use case they can associate with it versus all the buzzwords and all the hype. So like Starbucks hasn't mentioned NFTs once, but they're using NFTs for their loyalty program. So I think that's a big distinction is they don't want to polarize their existing audience of people that aren't early adopters. They're not like us where they're fully in on it and they have all the education, but they still want to introduce the innovation that we're creating in the space. So I think overall, we're moving in a pretty healthy direction. I think there's a few pieces of tension we're going to see continue to expand, which is centralization versus decentralization, which platforms are going to get the most adoption as we keep on building these spaces. My gut's going to say if you can provide more value to creators, that's where brands will end up following. And there's a few ways to do that. I think the Unreal Engine does a good job by product development. They've created an incredible product where even though Fortnite's centralized, the product is so good that creators benefit from that and are going to create great things in those worlds. They also take the open source strategy, which has some level of decentralization to it. And then you have blockchain worlds like Sandbox or Decentraland, where there's royalties and creators can financially benefit from those worlds. So wherever the creators end up going to produce content, that's where you're going to end up with the biggest audience and the biggest eyeballs. And I think brands will build on top of what happens with those creators. So overall, moving in a healthy direction, but there's still a lot floating around for deciding where we're going to end up in 5, 10, 20 years, right?
Indeed. Thank you, Ricky. Points well made. Jacky, turning to you and the wonderful work that you're doing with AllStarsWomen. Being that we're on the precipice of incredible adoption of these technologies that we're speaking of, and we all know that there's a great benefit in making sure that we have as many communities of culture and people to build out these technologies to make a better fundamental awareness of what it is building. I would speak to the adage that we want to hire the people that we want to buy our products. Jacky, are we doing enough to get women and leadership involved in this space? And if not, what can we do about it?
Okay, so the major thing about what's happening in Web3 is that people in Web2 are moving to Web3. So we have a lot of leadership that had been in Web2 before now that are now becoming leaderships in Web3. And of course, lots of those people are men. So you see CEOs, most of the CEOs of Web3 brands are men. Although we do have a lot of women coming up, but not as much as we would hope to have. So, like for what we do in All Stars Women, what we're doing is creating a platform for women. Lots of women want to get into the space, but they don't have an idea how to go about it. They feel like if they can't code, if they don't know how to use all the tech jargon, they'll be lost. And so, what we are creating for them is we're first of all educating them. So we have partners that we're working with we're trying to create that platform for training first. And then again, we are also going to meet companies to tell them that you need to make it a priority. We're not going to pay lip service to just saying, oh, we're going to get women inclusive. We're talking about inclusion. We're talking about diversity, and people are just paying lip service. We are now actually going out and getting them to sign to say that we really are going to employ this quota of women in our organizations. Now, we might not be moving as fast as we want to, but we are creating the roadmap and the template so that we can drive that. Women are coming into the space. We do have a large community in All Stars Women where a lot of women, we have lots of women that are CEOs and all of that. But I think that there's still a whole lot of women that need to come in. So the first thing is training. And then the second thing is making that work by people really driving it and not just paying lip service to it, but being able to drive it. And then organizations adopting the culture of putting women leadership and making it paramount. And then probably getting penalized if they don't do that. Because in Web3, we are not doing Web2 all over again, but we are trying to change the culture. We're trying to change the way things have been done in the past. And that means that more women are included in leadership and not just speaking about it. Thank you.
Thank you, Jacky, and we thank you for your leadership as well. Kristina, when we talk about this expansive space of Web3, as Ricky just made some incredible points on enterprise and Jacky about the need for leadership and growth, are we seeing a healthy and vital consortium, if you will, of companies finding their way in this expansive jungle that we call the Web3? Are we seeing some stability when it comes to enterprise and startup? And is there opportunity out there for companies and brands, as Ricky made mention of, to succeed and to grow in this very volatile space?
It's a great question and something that we've built into our business model at Continuum. So essentially showing their growth and showing them expanding, showing the partnerships and the crossover. Continuum is a 5-year network of trusted resources. And when someone like Beyonce or a sports athlete comes in and they want an NFT project, it's really important that they're connecting with the people that can actually get things done, whether that's code or marketing or product placement or sales, that this becomes a vernacular everyone can agree to these terms. I call it speaking blockchain. And I've definitely seen a remarkable curve uptick in innovators in the last 5 years. So when I joined in 2017, it was height of BTC, right before the 2018 ICO craze. People were throwing money around with just buzzwords, right? A lot of those companies are not here anymore. And so when we have bear and bull markets, the bear markets tend to kind of thin out the herd, and you're left with people that have a very solid business plan and user adoption. So at Continuum, we're actually measuring for each brand the tech, team, and intentions. We're measuring their credibility, trust, and adoption metrics in order to connect them with other trusted resources to help them grow faster. There's a whole bunch of things that I know that maybe the world doesn't know because I'm up to my eyeballs in it every single day, talking with product founders and service providers and event producers that are trying to bring people together to the table to solve really big problems and make it very easy and turnkey for Web2 to come in a safe way without them needing to know all the things that I know. And so that's a huge piece of what Continuum is doing. We only deal with brands that are safe for you as consumers, specifically so we can help all of those trusted brands move faster. Every blockchain brand has the exact same challenges. Most of those challenges come to a head at Capitol Hill, and we're on the side of the blockchain brands to fight if we need to make changes or engage lobbying groups. These are very real conversations that the community at large in Web3, we talk about all of this in amongst ourselves. At Continuum, we want to bring that conversation much more publicly forward and show the brands like Starbucks, be able to show that Starbucks does have a blockchain component and that they are showing month over month growth because of that blockchain influence. And that expands bigger and bigger on our data vision at Continuum Market of showing the growth of the blockchain industry, ultimately coalescing with our data science product Quandex, which will show the growth of the growth of the blockchain industry impact to the global economic engine, and show that this is really something that makes the world go around.
Indeed. Thank you, Kristina. Continuum's doing shepherd's work with your leadership. And we look at that, and here's a fascinating consideration that Ricky made mention of Starbucks, and now Kristina has as well. Starbucks at one point was just one location. Now they've grown to be so expansive to where they're using NFTs, yet by a different name, if you will, when we talk about brand. It gives great lend of consideration how these new startups that are entering into this environment need guidance and need a way to be able to grow and foster in these environments. They understand leadership, and they certainly enjoy autonomy and may find themselves industrious, but the winds of war, if you will, of navigating in this terrain could be very interesting to find itself to be able to enter as an enterprise, if you will. But on that notion, we're seeing disruption, and I want to switch the topic to talk about disruption. When we look at centralization versus decentralization, let's talk about organizational structures. David Jean, you are an expert when we start to think about the conversation. For audience listening, we're going to delve into a second here and talk about DAOs, decentralized autonomous organizations. You may have heard of it. You may have heard good stories, and Ricky, they may have heard bad ones, Jacky. But Kristina, we're going to talk about this with the good sense of a spirit that let's look at it from more of a lens of optimism at the moment. David, can you give us the very cutting edge word of understanding of where DAOs are right now today and why they could benefit those that are listening?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, Christopher, we've had a lot of personal discussions around DAOs and how powerful it is in terms of restructuring how we work today. But in short, decentralized autonomous organizations, DAOs, it's short for decentralized autonomous organization. So if you think about today's corporate structure, it's shaped like a pyramid. There's a few stakeholders, board members, executives that are up on top that are making all the decisions for the company or entity. And for DAOs, it's going to be really cool. What it basically is like a bunch of like-minded people form an organization together. But instead of a pyramid, of course, being small at the top with leadership and being centralized leadership, it's inverted. Everyone actually gets to have a vote and a say based on the DAO, based on your contributions, how much you put into the DAO, how much you work for the DAO. And then you get to reap the benefits without having a central entity eat it up all on top. We all see the disparity with CEO salaries versus the people who are actually on the front lines of work. But with DAOs, it totally changes the dynamic. So I always kind of explain it like almost like fan clubs. You could be a fan club towards music or social giving or the environment and form businesses or entities around that and structure it as a DAO where people are voting. It's more democratized and it's all for the better good, and everyone kind of reaps the rewards versus just a few on top.
Indeed. Thank you, David. Jacky, community. It's been made mention of all throughout today, all through our speakers and earlier roundtable discussion. I must ask, when we talk about community and representation globally, are we seeing all continents involved in this growing sphere of technology that we call Web3? And if not, how do communities come together to corral and to be able to find and share and exchange different cultures to be able to start forming human ecosystems towards building together?
Okay, I think that's a very interesting question. The major thing about communities is that first of all, what's going on in the continents is that lots of continents are quickly catching on where Web3 is concerned. At different areas, in different areas they have their strengths, but there are different ways that they are coming on board in Web3. And how they are doing that is through communities. Now these communities are very, very essential, like what you're doing right now, creating this event. You're using it to drive community. I'm in Africa, Kristina is somewhere in the US, and everybody is in different parts of the world, and they are all connecting to this conference. So by connecting to this conference, in a sense, you're building community. So by hosting things like this all over the world, you're driving people to think the same way. Because if people are listening to this from Australia, they're listening to this from Africa, they're listening to this from the US, and then they can listen to what Ricky is saying, they can listen to what all those wonderful speakers have said, it helps them to think alike. It helps a community in Africa to be thinking the same way community in the US is thinking. So when we host events, it's not just about maybe driving the hype and maybe selling products. We are also engaging communities, causing them to think the same way, causing them to grow the same way. For me personally, in driving communities, I know lots of people have said different things about communities, but for me personally, I think that there should be some sort of synergy with communities based on product type. So if, for instance, I have a product in Africa that is doing exactly the same thing as what Kristina is doing in her own country, there should be a way to synergize her community and my community so that we can drive the same energy and achieve more. Because when we do the same thing, when she's doing the same thing, I am doing the same thing, there's a lot of duplicity in what people, in things that people are bringing out. That's why when you see a product, this one is, someone is bringing a particular product out, it's similar, and you're thinking, oh, I've heard something like this before. And you hear somebody else bring out the same product, and oh, I've heard the same thing. So it's not going to drive innovation if people are doing the same thing but are bringing it and driving it under one community. But it will drive innovation if people can come together and synergize, unify their community, and then grow together. So I like what we're doing. We are doing the same thing in AllStarsWomen. So we have communities in Africa, we have communities in Brazil, we are doing the same thing in Dubai, in Saudi Arabia. So it's the same thing we're doing, but we are bringing the communities together and we are causing them to come and synergize so that at the end of the day, we are able to achieve a common goal. So yes, lots of people are talking about community, but the major thing about community is driving a particular goal. So if we are not working together, if we know that I have a product, what I'm doing is the same thing as what Christopher is doing, then it's very important that we come together and we synergize. And not only do we synergize, but we bring our communities together. That way, adoption will be faster, and then communities will go bigger, and then other people all over the world can be doing similar things at the same time. Thank you.
Indeed, it speaks to an adage of, say, for Simon Sinek, people don't buy products and services, they buy culture. To
Yeah.
me, when we think about culture and integration in the technology itself, that starts with people and human centricity. A wonderful point to be made, Ricky. I have to ask, decentralization itself. For some, it's a word of taboo, and for others, it's embraced almost as a utopian consideration or fantasy. From your lens and what you're seeing in technology, when we talk about decentralization, which it seems to me that there may be a colloquialism in it of understanding, but then sometimes it feels like it's something more. What is decentralization for you? And as we hear it today, under the auspices of Web3, is it a good thing?
So it's interesting because I think that the main people that are the loudest when they're talking about decentralization is mostly the kind of crypto native community, like the people that are really core to the space from a blockchain perspective. But the reality is, if you think about how society works, even before the internet, like if we go back a couple thousand years, we've always worked together with different skill sets. Like you might have one guy who's a blacksmith who's going to make your sword, and someone else who's a farmer who's growing your crops. And like as a society, we develop different skills. We all have our own traits as people, and we provide value to a community with that trait. And with the blockchain, you can't expect every person to be a cybersecurity expert. You can't expect every person to do absolutely everything on their own. So I think that the idea of decentralization is people feeling hurt that there's a couple of companies that are controlling too much of data, and they want to break that up a little bit, and they're trying to find a way that's on the other extreme to counteract that. But there is this value decentralization that we can't ignore, that if we are working together as a community and we have trusted kind of experts for certain things and certain use cases, like that's not going to go away. We even see it in the blockchain with centralized exchanges, right? Like most people are buying their crypto from something like a Coinbase, right? And so I lean personally towards the side that centralization is not going anywhere. We're never going to go to a fully decentralized state. I don't think it would actually be good for us if we did. But there are things that can be more spread out, where we don't have to have all of the power in one place. We can find ways to share that amongst a few different parties, or with things like DAOs or other structures, to create more equality and more inclusivity across the board. There is one thing I want to circle back on community, though, that I think is really interesting, because I think that there's this new phenomenon going on in the enterprise world around customer advocacy, where companies are starting to shift their approach to sales and shift their approach to marketing to focus more on customer needs. It's why we're seeing the trend of product-led growth and ways to get customers less friction to adopt products, give us more feedback, be a part of the value chain, a part of the buying experience with us, versus us against them, like the old school car insurance salesman, right? And there was this meme that went on viral on LinkedIn the other day, and I thought it was very funny, but it also is a great reflection of Web3. This guy created a fake LinkedIn profile where he was a account manager for Netflix, a uncertified genius for Apple, and like basically an advertising target for Facebook. Like, he made himself a customer as an employee for all these different companies. Very funny. It's great that it went viral. But if you think about it, there's a lot of truth in that. Like, one of his responsibilities for Apple was showing grandma how to use my iPhone. And so I think it's a good thing for us to remember that our customers are, in a way, a part of our culture as a business. They're not separate to us. We're offering them value, but they're offering us value back, mostly in revenue, but also in sharing ideas with other customers and building on top of what we're creating internally, giving us feedback so we've developed better products. So I think I just wanted to emphasize that community aspect of things. I think that's the future of business, is leading with empathy, inclusivity, and less customer targeting and more community development.
What an incredible point when we start to think about decentralization versus centralization in the customer service apparatus. We know that companies and platforms, let's say, such as Amazon, are really striving and make emphasis on customer service, try as they might. But in some ways, it is a great experience for some. But customer service is so central and key to maintaining the integrity and the current disposition of a platform, Ricky, and great points that are met, especially when considering that while we want decentralization to arrive, centralization will not just disappear into a vat of nothingness, if you will. I must ask, though, Kristina, we talk about the power of blockchain. We look at proof of work and proof of stake and proof of history, loyalty, and all different variances. You made mention of the 5 years ago, what blockchain looked like. I want to ask, from 5 years ago to today, and 5 years ahead, what is the power of the blockchain?
Well, I love that you said the blockchain. There's a lot of people that refer to blockchain as the blockchain. I can't wait to meet the blockchain one day. I'm looking forward to that. The conglomeration of the 50 or so blockchains that are empowering brands to do things they've never been able to do before. Those 50 blockchains have tools like, so we'll start at the beginning. So they have tools like an actual cryptocurrency that is used for exchange of goods and services. Then they have more things that used to be called utility tokens. At Continuum, we call them Chuck E. Cheese tokens. They have value within the four walls, but it would take an external force to say that they have value anywhere else. And that's where we're seeing that blend start happening. There's a lot of other places going, I'll take your token. I'll let you take your Chuck E. Cheese token and buy real cheese with it. That's what Capitol Hill's really upset about, by the way. But it also allows for folks to be able to contribute. And what a term that we use in Web3, own your data, own your content, get the middleman out of the payment system. So that peer-to-peer system really eliminates the need for middlemen. Well, middlemen services is what makes the global economic engine go around. It's what we've built almost all capitalism on up until now. So blockchain enablement allows for, number one, first thing is data validation. You can go all the way to the blockchain to see that that transaction happened, and that transaction can't happen unless it had the funds to move it in the first place. So understanding that piece of blockchain is a fundamental cornerstone to understanding the potential of Web3. Disrupting middlemen and creating this peer-to-peer infrastructure now allows us to have the next layer up, which is payment gateways and railways and integration layers. That's where your digital assets are really coming into it. I own this thing, and that gives me the right to do X, Y, and Z. Those things can all be managed under smart contracts, and the ownership of the asset can go as specific as a one of one, unique, you know exactly where it came from by assigning an NFT to that. Now, that can be a digital asset, a physical asset, or a combo of the both, something in Web3 we call phygital. And when standard household name brands are starting to understand the participatory reward economies behind these blockchain infrastructures, that's where the consumer behavior really starts to go. I don't need to know why it works. It just works. And there's these extra things in my bank account or these extra things in my wallet that allow me to have asset and value out in the real world. Now I can take loans against that. There is an entire like wealth generation spiral that happens when you as a human, whether you're a content creator, a coder, a speaker, a consultant, whatever you do in the world can be yours through blockchain, and that you can go all the way down to the granular checkbox that yes, it actually happened. How do you know? Because I can look at the blockchain it was built on. We put all those together, all 50 of them or so, collectively they become the blockchain. And that's kind of what we're talking about with Web3 is if you can do this, then you can do this. If you can do that, then you can do this. And it grows exponentially really, really fast. And that's why Capitol Hill is essentially putting so much review on what these guidelines need to look like. This week, Gary Gensler of the SEC will actually be at a Senate hearing testifying basically SEC being on trial for why the SEC wants to regulate crypto in the way that it wants to, and would there be other options. At Continuum, we've been following along what the politicians are doing. And state by state, we're seeing massive changes towards the concept of policy inclusion that is pro crypto. Side note, also a lot of pro cannabis things that are happening on the state level because the American global economy is changing. COVID changed everything, and now everybody has a different set of expectations of what that Jetsons future could look like if they could really empower the work that their hands and their mind does into tangible assets in their wallet.
Indeed. Outstanding, Kristina. And thank you for the refinement and understanding the blockchain versus blockchain. We need it. I have to ask, David, as I'm sitting here listening to the expressions of community by Jacky and Ricky, and Kristina clearly showing that there's a framework that's grown over time and that we're looking at legal and governance structures and regulation and better understanding this technology and how people will find ways to be able to govern. I have to ask, you've been in the halls of Dapper Labs, which is a very well-known entity in Web3, if you will, and also with Facebook and spending time and now of an X status. What do you want to see when it comes to Web3 in the future moving forward? And how might there be social sustainability and impact in what it is that you would like to see in this space?
Yeah, I mean, I may have a very controversial view, but I think we need more governmental regulation. Some of the stuff that Kristina was talking about, there's a large section of the world's population that still think NFTs and crypto are scams, right? And, when we have some of our, forerunner leaders in the space, like, Sam Friedman, who started FTX, he has all of his company stationed offshore outside of the United States, just for tax and governmental purposes. That's not right. And so that already sends a signal that, hey, look, things just aren't as clear and as protective for investment. So I see more governance coming down. I see that in the future. People will feel more secure. People will invest in this asset. Two, I think we already have kind of a framework and a playbook of what we learned from this first explosion of NFTs. In 2020, I think we made like 94 million in revenue of all of the NFT space, non-fungible tokens, ownership of digital assets. That first wave came out as art and collectibles because people kind of understand that. And then, of course, in 2021, I mean, we saw a jump from 94 million up to 24 billion, I believe. That's a huge jump in 1 year's time. So what did that beta test prove out? That proved out people are interested in owning digital content. People are interested in speculating and investing in NFTs that might be more valuable later. But at the same time, the third is that we know from this bear market, NFTs, they're going to be due for a correction. I don't think people are going to be like, yeah, I want to spend several hundred thousands for a JPEG. And even though all the cool things they could possibly do with that ownership, like franchise it out, create the additional products, I think a lot of those promises probably won't give way in the coming years. So there's probably going to be kind of like a correction in terms of how people are investing in NFTs. But I think so. Yeah, to sum it up, I see more regulation, so people are more interested in the space, so people feel safe. And two, just the idea of digital ownership, that's going to then parlay into many other things like utility, access, that we just haven't figured out yet either.
Indeed, David. Thank you. Jacky, what do you want from the future of Web3?
Okay, what I want from the future of Web3 is just for people to make more money, for creators to be able to access the funds that is theirs, and also for us to be able to create more use cases to incorporate more industries. Like I'm seeing a whole lot of things going on in the medical field. So if we can include more of Web3 into the medical field, solve problems, because actually what Web3 is supposed to do is to solve problems. So when you create enough use cases, then you're able to solve problems. So when you solve problems, you make money. So if people can get more problems solved in the space that incorporates other industries, that will solve problems, that would create more adoption, and that would create a bigger and better playground for everybody in the space. So that's what I see.
Thank you, Jacky. Ricky, ultimately, is Web3 a value add for corporations as we know it?
Oh, definitely. I think it's going to take some time because for very large companies, they develop these antibodies, right? Where they don't like to change quickly because they have something that's so stable and so functional, and it get that big. And so any disruption to that, like people might explore it, and then if they don't see immediate value quickly enough, then they might get sucked back through those antibodies to stability. And it's really difficult to disrupt big companies to make a big change. So the thing I always like to remind people is just, again, this is not a full 180 on what we've already been doing for the last 20, 30 years, right? Like the words have taken off so much and we've associated them with monkey pictures selling for millions of dollars, to where I think there's been a lot of distraction from the core of what's really happening. And the reality is it's just an extension of where we've already been. Technology has been innovating for a while. And I was just reading a book by Eric Redmond, who's the founder of technical innovation at Nike. And there's a great quote in that book where he talks about what deep tech is and the importance of innovation for businesses. Every business has to be a tech company. That's the future. Technology is just using less resources to achieve better results. And if you look at the technology that's most innovative right now, it's things that yesterday would have not been conceivable. Today, it's barely even possible. And in the future, they're going to be so prevalent that we won't even be able to consider what life was like without them. And that technology on that list is blockchain, AI, 3D printing, extended reality, quantum computing. Like these are the things that if you're a CEO or a CMO or a CTO, you have to be thinking about these things for driving that innovation, not catching the wave on someone else. Because anything you're not creating, you're outsourcing. And it's always going to be more efficient for you to be driving forward than it is for you to be hopping on for the other person in your industry, right?
Indeed. The cacophony of the mixture between customer service, which is expressed by you, Ricky, David, with regards to regulation, and Jacky, with wealth sustainability. It seems to me that we're looking at a great opportunity for companies and corporations who are people to really find ways to reward, but at the same time share in relatability to the customer, and maybe even drive revenue and capital opportunities for what they do and how they operate. it seems to me that there's something that's so inherently favorable when it looks to the outlook of what Web3 does, as opposed to looking at decentralization of removing centralization. How about looking at Web3 as something that enhances centralization and at the same time gives people an opportunity to enjoy and explore on their own opportunities of autonomy, if you will, when it comes to their own ventures and industrious hearts that are setting sail into the wilds of the world. Kristina, we'll route this to you. The future of Web3, from your lens, what do you want it to be?
As Continuum measures the blockchain industry into the next decade, specifically the 2030 goals that we have for moving the industry forward, we would like to see an equitable future where no matter your geolocation on the planet, that you have access to revenue-making opportunities through digital platforms. We would like to see ownership of digital assets be classified in a taxable way that makes sense for the participating economies. We would like to see the innovation from the technologists that can do these things with ones and zeros. We'd like to see it be welcome in the US so that the US is actually generating those tax revenues. We also would like to see a lot of the things that we call save the world that fall in the Jetsons future section around pollution cleanup, clean air, healthy food, the supply chains that make the world go around. We would like to see those things happen. We also see, the gig economy being a huge factor here, taking your car as an asset, as an Uber driver or loaning it out to another Uber driver. That can be taken all the way down to, your bread maker is loaned within your community of trusted people, right? All of these things, they require gateways and digital identities. So we would like to see the structure in the US be positive towards receiving that type of innovation so that these blockchain brands can bring these solutions to the public no matter where they are on the planet. And I think that's going to be incredibly important for us to evolve as a human species together as we start to move off planet into the space economy, some of the afterlife economies that are happening, these things that Wall Street doesn't really talk about, but the ones and zeros can do it. The AI can do it. And we need to be cognizant where we want to go as a human species when we empower that technology, because some pretty disastrous things can happen if you allow technology to try and make decisions based off of previous human behavior. So the way you train your AI and the way you train your ones and zeros is going to be absolutely critical. That's a big piece of our vetting process at Continuum upfront, understanding tech, team, and intentions. What are you actually trying to do, and what does it mean to my cousin?
Well expressed. And to the audience that's with us, that's had the opportunity to sojourn with these expressions, we ask that you individually reach out to those that have expressed from their lens of a perspective of whether we've been moving fast enough or too fast. It seems to me that we have a long way to go. And the faster we get there, the better it will be for more available tool and utility of accessibility, and a more equal Web3 will only make our communities stronger. That said, Ricky, Jacky, and Kristina and David, we have thoroughly enjoyed this conversation and discussion. There will be people that will come and look at this for days and weeks and months to come and our gatherverse.live. And to the audience and those that are with us, join us tomorrow morning as we have more wood to chop and seeds to plant, as we continue to further explore this Web3 world from a humanity-first perspective. And with Gatherverse, humanity first in accessibility, education, equality, community development, safety, and privacy and wellness are so central to what we believe in that if we're going to extend reality, then we must bring reality with it. And if we're going to succeed at anything in technology, then everyone must have the opportunity to build it. And so you've heard from more expressions of voices of people beyond hardware and software of whom we make these things for. We hope that everyone's keeping safe and well. Thank you for joining us. We look forward to seeing you tomorrow morning. May our gather continue to be well. Thank you. Good night.